My name's Mary Tingerthal. For 8 years, from 2011 to 2019, I served as the executive director of the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. So I got the chance to see a lot of housing develop, both single-family, multifamily. And during the entire 8 years that I was there, the thing that vexed me the most was that every year the cost of housing went up faster than people's incomes. So all of the presentation you saw about the demographics, the shortage of building, was right in my face every day that I showed up for work. And in 2017, a good friend, Carol Galante, who's been very much a part of Ivory Innovations, invited me out to an open house for the then new Turner Center and introduced me to a guy by the name of Rick Holliday, who was about to close on the purchase of the land for Factory OS. And it was frankly the first time I had ever heard of the idea of commercial modular construction. I knew all about modular construction for single-family homes, but for me, commercial modular was just an idea that I thought made a lot of sense. In 2019, I decided I finally had time, because I didn't need to work full-time anymore, that I wanted to learn more about this thing called modular construction. And so I reached out to some of my contacts in Minnesota, raised a little bit of money, pulled together a symposium that we called Construction Revolution, and you can still find it today on the web, constructionrevolution.io, that brought together about 150 people to talk for a full day about modular construction. And they were people like you in this room, public officials, manufacturers, contractors, designers, engineers, and even lenders. And we brought them together and thought about what it would take to bring more modular construction to the state of Minnesota, which is where I'm from. So in many ways, we were then where Utah is now in terms of wanting to explore, wanting to do more modular construction in the state of Utah. We're very excited. We connected with ModX, which came in to be one of our speakers, and we subsequently put together some further education. It was, at that time, I was interviewed by the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, and they said, well, Mary, what would really be success? And I said, well, I think if by the year 2025, we could have 10% of our commercial buildings for residential built modular, that would be amazing. And I thought at that time, that was a really achievable goal. Sadly, we're way behind that pace. But I'm encouraged when I come into a room like this that there are still people out there who are willing to roll up their sleeves and make things happen from the point of view of modular. So I have the pleasure today of presenting a case study. It's a real case study with real people and real financing and real modules that is happening as we speak in the city of Minneapolis. And it has so many layers of innovation, I thought it was a really appropriate case to present at the Ivory Innovations Conference. Wrong button, sorry. All right, first of all, I do want to tell you that these slides will be made available to the attendees. There is way too much information on these slides for me to share with you in the next 25 minutes. So please don't worry about having to capture all the information on the slides. You can pull them down eventually from Ivory Innovations. So this is a photo of a recently completed fourplex in the city of Minneapolis on an infill site, which was made possible by an innovation that was recognized by Ivory Innovations in 2020, which is the Minneapolis 2040 plan. This is a plan, it's been very controversial, it's currently being challenged in the courts, that removes by right zoning for single family housing. And it's being challenged for some very interesting reasons, which I won't go into. But it really opened the door to the city thinking about what would buildings look like if you were to put somewhat larger buildings within a single-family neighborhood. And one of the things that came out of this is that one of the people who worked on the 2040 plan went to work for the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. And I think without that happening, this project would never have happened. There are now families living in this property as of October 1st. So it's a scattered site, multifamily, individual housing project, and it was developed, for those of you who are in the finance part of this field, as a single low-income housing tax credit project. That alone would be enough complexity. So we decided that we'd then make it full volumetric modular, which required an innovative procurement process. And then we said, well, it's affordable housing, so let's put together the hardest set of financing resources we can think of. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the people that really made this happen. It's the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. They're a pretty innovative group of folks, and one of the things they did was form a wholly owned subsidiary that allowed them to convert some of their public housing funding authority into project-based vouchers, which about doubled the value of those vouchers. And this was a key factor in being able to assemble the dollars that were needed for this project. The project overview is the city of Minneapolis. You can see the little gray dots. Those are actually scattered site properties that are currently managed by the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. They've had a very high number of scattered site projects for many years. They've been very happy with the success of the families in those units. And so when they decided to develop new housing, they felt it was very important that they be scattered site as well. The future tenants will all be people from the MPHA family housing waiting list. And as those of you who know public housing, that means a lot of people because the typical wait time is something like 6 to 7 years. What brought them there was developing a strategic vision and the fact that the city already owned a fair number of scattered site properties that could not be redeveloped for a number of reasons, as they just weren't financially feasible to rehabilitate them. And so they had a number of sites that they could use for a scattered site project. They currently manage 540 units. And importantly, the last 3 bullets on this slide, they felt really strongly that scattered site was the way to go because of their residents. Historically, they have seen increased employment rates, increased incomes, and many families have gone on to homeownership if they had the opportunity to live in a scattered site. So what we went from is 16 sites to 84 families that could live in scattered sites because they were living in 4plexes and 6plexes instead of living in single-family homes. It's a huge multiplier effect for a program that's been so successful for families. One of the things that struck me listening this morning is that innovation, wherever it happens, has to happen within the local context. I even talked about the fact that there's a lot of excitement in Sweden and in the European Union because they now may have a platform that will allow for more innovation. And the thought of having something like that in the US is really pretty exciting. But within the city of Minneapolis, they had really set a pretty good set of goals for what they wanted to accomplish with their city housing policy. They wanted to pursue innovative housing types. How's that for a nice way to set this up? High value on 3-bedroom apartments for families, serving the lowest income households, ensuring long-term housing affordability, improving and expanding their public housing stock, and to be built in all parts of the city. And when the Public Housing Authority put together their work plan for this project, they addressed every single one of those priorities in the way that they put the program together. This is what some of the scattered site housing looked like on the sites that were already owned by the Public Housing Authority. In the same neighborhood, we saw an innovation. This was the first multifamily modular project built in Minneapolis. It was opened in January of 2021. The modules built and the construction done by a company called Rise Modular, which began manufacturing modular for commercial in a town south of Minneapolis, right in the middle of the pandemic. They opened their doors in May of 2020. Still amazes me. And this was their first project. This was built on a site where there had previously been 2 single-family homes. So as a proof of concept, it really said, hey, you can make housing on an infill site that upzones it, but doesn't create a hassle for the neighborhood. One other thing about this, it's very close to transit, and so they were able to get approval from the city because of the 2040 plan to not have to provide on-site parking, which is often a very expensive proposition for multifamily housing in Minnesota. Shifting now to the PHA and what they needed to do, one of the things I'll say, if you're a public entity, you live with a whole set of requirements that are well-intentioned, but oftentimes add a lot of time and a lot of expense to when you're building housing. So when the folks at the Public Housing Authority realized that they wanted to do something unusual with their scattered site project, they also realized that they had some pretty strict procurement guidelines, and they worked very closely with their procurement department to create a never-before-used structure for procuring a development team for this scattered site process. And they wanted design and construction teams to start collaborating from the beginning. I can't remember who it was, but on the last panel, I think it was John, talked about the fact that coordinating among the designers, the construction company, the modular manufacturer, building officials from the very beginning is key to success, and that's what happened in this particular project. So they did a 2-part procurement. This is the innovative part of it, where they did a request for qualifications. They set a low bar to entry, and the PHA provided a set of basic design requirements, access to potential sites, so the bidders could actually go in and look at the sites where they'd be building these, and stated a preference for modular and that the winning proposal would have more larger units. They got 8 different proposals, of which 3 included a modular manufacturer as part of the team. And as part of the proposal, you had to bring in a modular manufacturer, a construction company, and an architect into the team. You had to have that regardless if you were doing all of them yourself or if you were bringing 3 different parties to the team. They selected the 3 most qualified teams, and one of those happened to be the team that involved Rise Modular. They compensated all 3 of those teams to create a schematic design based on a provided scope of services. So it wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough for 3 teams to say, we're willing to put a little more time into this in order to get a little more detailed proposal at the time. They asked for initial construction pricing, and they evaluated the teams on cost, design, and construction process. Now, I don't need to remind probably most of the people in this room of why it is that they were looking and hoping that volumetric modular would be in the winning team. And that is that because of simultaneous on-site and off-site construction, that you can save 30 to 50% of the time. It also, a couple of impacts on here, I won't talk about all of them. It was really a factor because they were looking to get families into housing quickly, that the construction timeframe for this complicated scattered site project was 33% faster than the stick-built process. And there was less truck traffic because you're going into 11 different neighborhoods with these 16 sites, fewer workers on site, and construction activities move inside much faster. Literally, you have on day one, when you're setting 6 modules in one day, which they did on the fourplexes, you have the ability to keep the site very quiet and very friendly in a single-family neighborhood. Oops. One other factor I want to talk about, because I know scattered site gets talked about a lot as a desirable thing. One of the benefits of modular was that we had essentially one design, which I'll show you in a minute, and it had to fit on a number of different sites with a number of different challenges, including mature trees, because this is in the middle of the city. And before they even bid, the team that ended up being the winning team went on to multiple sites to say, are there 16 sites among the ones that the city made available where this building footprint will fit? And if you look at these 6 sites, you will see that the building footprint is exactly the same, regardless of whether it's a 4-plex or a 6-plex. And the decision about which type of property, 4-plex or 6-plex, depended a lot on the size of the structure and, frankly, whether you could get the parking that was required on the site. Oops. Sorry about that. The design that was selected, and on the last page of this presentation, you have the contact information for the architect who designed this project, was to make a single building type that has a 4-unit and a 6-unit variant. So the 4 units are 2 stories, 1 bedroom, 1 2-bedroom, and 3 3-bedrooms. And the 6-unit is 3 stories with 2 2-bedrooms and 4 3-bedrooms in the building. So if you do the math on that, that meant that this brought to the table 58 3-bedroom units, a really tough type of building to get. And it's 130,000 square feet of building spread over 16 sites. Here's what the design looks like, and this is pretty unconventional for commercial modular. It has 2, it's like a sandwich on each floor. So you have this is made up of 3 modules. You have the 2 outer modules, which have the living space, and then you have a center module, which has almost all of the plumbing, the utility rooms, storage rooms, and importantly, the 2 stairwells that lead up to the upper floors. And this allowed for each of these units to essentially be identical, even though they were on 16 sites. Whoops, sorry about that. All right, this is where you see some of the challenges of doing a scattered site project in the city. Each of these sites, we have a lot of trees in Minnesota, a lot of mature trees, and lifting them up and over and getting them down. These are 16 feet wide, 72 feet long. Getting them down some of these residential streets was a little bit breathtaking, but ultimately successful. And all of the buildings have now been completely set, and they are now being finished. The first tenants moved in October 1st. The final tenants will move in December of this year. So very fast process. This is what the units looked like inside on day 1. So this is the level of finish. And what the on-site crews did was stitch these units together and do the finishing work, do all of the site work, do all the connections of the utilities. And as John said, it allowed a a contractor that is a union contractor, paid union wages, to take a crew that was not all that large and literally move them sequentially from site to site. So you can stretch your work crew over a number of sites, and turned out to be very efficient for them. This is what the sixplex looks like in finished form. Really did a good job. There are several different colors of the outside panels to fit in with the color scheme of the neighborhoods. And this is the family that was at our ribbon cutting that was one of the first families moving into this project. This is the hard part to talk about. This was not an inexpensive process. This project went into bidding for subcontractors at approximately the worst time that I can imagine. During 2021, when we were experiencing supply chain problems, delays in delivery materials, workforce shortages, extra requirements for worksite facilities, was when they were procuring the subcontractors. I will tell you that the modular portion of this went up only about 10% during that time period. The construction costs on the remainder of the project went up by about 40% during that project. So they ended up in a worse place than they hoped. One thing I'll say from an Ivory Innovations and education standpoint is the PHA is doing a very thorough job on digging into the what happened and why, so that they can share lessons learned with their colleagues around the country. One thing I do want to point out is that, excuse me. Uh-oh. There we go, whoops. I was telling this to Matt Haas, who you'll hear about from this afternoon. We were not going to go with a minor lender who might be a little bit more familiar with this type of construction. U.S. Bank is the investor in the low-income housing tax credits and is also the construction financer. And Citibank is the permanent financing. So we went absolutely mainstream with our financing partners. And while it wasn't easy, we did get to closing. And I do want to go through the timeline here. This project concept was established in December of 2020, and the first building was ready for lease up in August of 2023. All of the construction financing was finally brought together in February of 2022. So for those of you who do work in the affordable housing field, this is really a pretty incredibly fast process, especially given the complexity of the transaction. So with that, I will just land on this statement from the CEO of the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. For families from MPHA's waiting list, today is a life-changing moment. This was at the groundbreaking. The success of this project provides a blueprint for developing new, high-quality, deeply affordable housing across Minneapolis. And here you have the important partners. Juan Torres is the project manager for MPHA. Juan is an amazing guy, and he has a background. He's an architect. He also did internships with the Boston Public Housing Authority and with the Community Builders, which is a nonprofit developer out of the Boston area, and then brought his amazing talent to Minneapolis, and we're so happy to have him. And then Amanda Pedersen from Architect DJR really have been a great partner, DJR has, and Amanda did an amazing job of interacting not only with the neighborhoods in terms of the approval process, but also with the general contractor for Eric's construction, just being very, very patient with all of the complexity of translating these modular construction plans into what would happen on the site. So with that, I am out of time. Happy to take questions. I put my email address on that as well. There's so many things I wanted to say during the panel before, because Minnesota actually has a pretty decent environment for inspections, and yet this project was pretty easy because it fell under the residential building code. Where we have had more complexity, and we'll talk more about that this afternoon, is when it comes to the commercial building code, and that's where things really start to unravel a bit. So with that, I will turn it over to Abby, and thank you.